Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining. My name is Sunny. I'm with Riaz Cavalli. So excited that you could join the second artist dialogue that we have today, where I'll be joined by a friend of mine and an amazing artist and a professional here in Houston, Danish Parbtani, to talk about community safety, what that means through the lens of um what each of us considers our community, and then also through the artistic interpretation of a ghazal that we're about to release. First of all, I want to introduce Danish and bring him on and say hello. Hey, thanks so much for joining.
Hey Sunny, how are you? Thank you for
Good.
having me.
Yeah, yeah. Thanks for making time. I know you're traveling a lot. You're busy at work, so I appreciate you making time. Danish and I share a very interesting love, which is the love for Urdu poetry. And that's where we're going to kick off talking about first. So, we are releasing a ghazal, um, and the video of that should be coming out this week uh, by Mirza Ghalib.
Mhm.
रोने से इश्क में और बेबाक हो गए धोए गए हम ऐसे के बस पाक हो गए. Danish, I know you're a big fan of Ghalib. Any thoughts on this?
Yeah, it's a fantastic ghazal, um, and Ghalib has a big place in Urdu poetry. Many artists have been inspired by Ghalib, and Ghalib's poetry has many levels, right? So each time you sort of read his poetry, there's a deeper meaning, that you come out. And he's also very sort of his style is sort of jolly. So he would often talk about pain, but he would talk about it in a way that sort of makes you smile as well.
Yeah, and I don't know. I also find Ghalib to be challenging. So I feel like part of that is like, understanding the vocabulary that he's using, and it's not traditional colloquial language of today. So that also makes the discovery or depth of his poetry even more, because you're having to read it again and again. Um, I actually think that the way he looks at poetry, um, I wouldn't use the word jolly. I love that you gave it a positive spin. I feel like he's like almost sarcastic, and the truth
Actually,
is, Ghalib
that's
had
a
a
better
really
word.
lovely life.
Yeah, that's a better word, sarcastic, where he again, like, he's talking about pain sometimes, but or tragedy, but he would talk about it in a way that kind of like, you know makes you smile, and makes you that share, ए दिले नादा तुझे हुआ क्या है आखिर इस दर्द की दवा क्या है,
Okay.
it's like being very sarcastic. And so yeah, he's got a very
But
very
his life was such a difficult one, with so much death that surrounded him. So
Mhm.
if you take that context into his poetry, the way that we're interpreting it almost makes sense. Like, he was dealing with such heavy topics all the time, and this was sort of his way of perhaps making it out. Um, and I think that speaks broadly to what art can do. Art can spark conversation. It can address topics that are really tough and difficult. Um, and that's kind of what I want to do with you, Danish, today, which is address community safety. It's a topic that, um, especially given this weekend and the tough news that we had this weekend from a Houstonian being killed. Um, it reminds us that it's not this um, thing that's happening outside, away from you. This is touching our lives, but we're coming at it from the angle of the arts. But before I go any further, I do want to introduce a little bit of Danish's background, because we didn't do that. Uh, Danish Parbtani, a friend of mine, is a Houston-based artist and a professional here, of course. Um, and Danish, you've been learning and performing for several years now, right?
Yeah, it's almost been 6 years.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And then what's really unique about your performance is that you're performing Qawwali now, but you grew up listening to Qawwali.
Yeah, I grew up. My childhood was in Pakistan, so Qawwali, naats, hums,
Yeah.
especially sung in Qawwali styles, was a big part of culture in Pakistan. So I grew up listening to it, and always had affinity to that sort of music, and also the poetry of Qawwali. Qawwali has Sufi poetry, but also then this ishke mijazi mixed with sort of ishke hakiki poetry that personally I get really drawn towards, because again that different levels of meaning and that different levels of um, um, understanding that you get as you continue listening to that poetry, and as you grow up and your understanding of these kind of concepts develops more and more. So I've always enjoyed Qawwali. I've always enjoyed the art of Qawwali and also the poetry
Poetry of Qawwali.
in
Do you
Qawwali.
remember one of your first? I don't know. Did you have a Qawwali that was your favorite when you were young?
I think Wohi Khuda Hai by
Khan Sahib.
Khan Saab. That was one of my favorites
All right.
growing up. But Khan Saab has done so many.
Yeah, it's
It's
hard.
hard to pick one.
Yeah, but I think I love that you talked about the poetry, because I think that's the other thing that's been a dialogue that you and I have had, which is the poetry. It sort of transcends boundaries,
Mhm.
and that leads us into the other thing that's really part uh, of what you do on a daily basis, or very regularly, not on a daily basis, but very regularly. You are involved with interfaith work. You've attended a lot of interfaith events, and that's likely stems from your deeper understanding of the poetry and faith in general. Any comments on that?
Um, yeah, so I think one thing that I I'd like to add is one of the other things that really draws me towards poetry is that oftentimes I've seen that poets have a way of sort of making commentary on society, uh, even
Mm.
political commentary,
Yeah, yeah.
and given the sort of the climate that we have lived in South Asia, especially Pakistan.
Mm.
Um,
Well, all of South Asia,
yeah,
you know.
I found that poets kind of get away with it because they have this art form and this sarcasm where they can make commentary about politics and or even society or the
And
ill.
claim it as artistic freedom, right? It's so
Yes.
like, no, 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 I wasn't talking about you.
or the ills in the society and get away with it,
Yeah, that's right. That's
uh,
right.
and they can touch sensitive subjects that have divided people, and yet they get away with that.
No, it's true. That is kind of the fun part of being an artist, right? And a creative,
Mhm.
that we can touch sensitive topics. But I also think art has this space that it can do
Yes.
that, right? I think there are very heavy things right now that we're dealing with. There are wars happening in parts of the world today, um, and you and I were talking just earlier, and you made a great point, which is everybody's words come with other meanings, and it's heavy. It's
Mhm.
there's a lot of baggage attached to it, and yet art has this power that it can bring you together.
Yes.
And sometimes that's the hardest thing, because we're so divided at this time.
Mhm.
Um, but I want to talk about Houston, Danish. We have some elections coming up. We're going to elect a mayor, some city council members, um, and that's really all exciting. But we are also coming off of a weekend where um, a Muslim South Asian pediatrician was stabbed. So, let me tie this into, um, Ghalib has a sher, Mauje khoon sar se guzar hi kyun na jaye, आस्ताने यार से उठ जाए क्या. So, you know, for us as a community, this is a moment where we're probably taken aback. We're probably worried.
Mhm.
Some of us want to retreat and say, let's just be safe in our places. But Ghalib says, we can't just leave. We can't just leave and we can't retreat. So I guess my first question to you is, um, we have a weekend where this person gets killed. We don't know why, so we're not trying to make assumptions as to what was the cause of her being brutally murdered, but this is a fact. Another fact is that we have more South Asians in careers that allow South Asians to be visible. That means, in the police, we see more South Asians. We have some in political office that we're so excited about. Um, but all that being said, what does it mean to you when I say the words community safety? And do you think that the current climate is making it harder to keep our community safe? I know a lot to unpack, but wherever you want to start, Danish.
Yeah, so I think this certainly was a big tragedy, and communities, shaken up by it.
Yeah,
Um, and we were all sort of anxious to sort of learn, what happened there.
yeah,
But I think this is the time for community to come together.
yeah,
This person happened to be a South Asian Muslim woman, but it could have been anybody else, right? So our community is very diverse, and sometimes we don't look at diversity as our strength, but in times like this, we actually need to come together.
yeah,
It could have been any other person, and given where sort of the political climate of this country is going, um, it is in our interest to sort of stay united as a community. So for me, community safety um, means that we stay united as a community. We protect our interest in America, in Houston. We protect and we work towards our interest as a community in Houston, and not be divided by political things or other things that are reality in South Asia. We don't need to import that. That is not our context. Our context is a American Houstonian South Asian context, and for us, for our interests, we need to stay together as communities and community members um, that are in careers such as law enforcement or political offices,
yeah,
or other careers that can impact, have a sort of a role to play here, have a leadership role to play here.
yeah,
And only staying together as a community can we guarantee our progress and our safety, and can we guarantee that these kind of events don't happen again. That also means that we need to not just sort of stay in our bubble as South Asians and just stay within our community. That also means that we need to do outreach with other communities within Houston, the larger Houston community.
yeah,
Outreach with them so they learn about us, they learn about our values, they learn about who we are as people, what sort of background and cultural context we come from.
yeah,
And they also learn about that we're not that different from them, and our values are not that different from them, right?
And this is not you just preaching. I mean, you've done some of this interfaith work, which is, you've stepped up and you've shown up where it wasn't just your community. And today you're better for that, right? You learned in those moments about your self, but also about others that showed up. And I
Exactly.
think we're in a really interesting position as Houstonians, because today we have some amazing uh, selfless, community-oriented folks who have stepped up
Hmm.
into political offices, into places like police, where that's not what they had to do.
Hmm.
This was a calling that they were called to, and they've shown up. So, South Asians are starting to show up, but I agree with your point. uh, you know, when something like this happens, like what happened this weekend, I also feel like we haven't done enough. We haven't shown up enough. We haven't empathized enough with others, sympathized enough with others. That's
Yeah,
that. That doesn't justify, what just happened. But I think broadly, as I talk about our community. Sorry,
and
you were
I
going
would
to say.
I would actually add that, we shouldn't just expect this from people in sort of law enforcement or political offices or other government offices. We should actually expect this from the business leaders in
Mm,
our community too. I mean, as an example, anytime a tragedy happens, I work for a corporate company. Anytime a big tragedy happens, a mass shooting or something like that in America, the corporations usually have some sort of message
yeah,
that they give out to their employees and stuff. And, um, we have successful business owners and who run, large companies, here in Houston and Texas area. And I
yeah,
think the leadership sort of goes to them as well, to as business leaders, to come out and sort of make it a bit more public and condone the violence that happened, right? Because only then we can sort of come um, and present ourselves as a strong united community,
yeah.
to the
But I
uh,
love the intention of what you're saying, which is like, this isn't just about, the select few. All of us have to show up, from
exactly.
all of our professions, from all of our communities have to show up to create a broader community, and then
Mm,
keep that community safe. And I think,
yeah,
that's part of that is, who's showing up to elect these folks, and how are we keeping them accountable? Because um, for us Houstonians, we need to think about that deeply. We are about to uh, really put into office somebody new as the mayor. So, are they going to know our communities? Are they going
mhm,
to appreciate our cultures, our faith traditions? And are they going to stick up for us when we need them, when something arises that's unsafe, um,
exactly,
and
exactly.
worrisome? So,
And that goes back to the outreach comment that I was making, that we cannot stay in our silos. Also, we need to outreach to the larger community and showcase who we are, and build those bridges and build those relationships, so we can show up when they're in trouble and they can show up when we're in trouble.
yeah, great point. So I think the other thing that I'm curious on about your thoughts are what you touched on with interests of the South Asian community.
Sorry.
We're immigrants. Interests of the South Asian community.
Mhm.
We're immigrants. We can't deny that we have roots from the many countries, the 9 countries that make up South Asia, um, and yet at the same time, we are a community that's here. So, what does it mean for us to create a stronger community here and keep that community protected here, while also recognizing that we can't just break off our connections from South Asia?
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right that we come from certain political and social context from South Asia. There are certain political realities in South Asia, and some of it gets imported here. Um, However, I also feel that um, our future and our progress here depends on us sort of putting our um, you know American Houston interest before what we import from South Asia.
Yeah,
If
that's
you
great. If you can repeat that, that's so. I feel like that's such a good point, and I feel like many times we both of us have walked into situations or have
Mhm.
left situations because they're so focused on what's happening thousands of miles away from us, but they're not acting on immediate threats that we have in our backyard. So
Exactly.
just say that again. I feel like people should hear it.
So again, like what I mean to say is, we still have connections
Yeah,
back home, right?
no
All
denying that. Yeah,
Yeah, the 9 countries that you mentioned, we still have connections back home. There are certain political realities in those countries. There are certain political divides and social divides in those countries. However, here in America, um, we have certain interests that can only be protected if we come together as a community, which means that we have to put our American interests before all the other baggage that we import
yeah,
from our background in South Asia. I think uh, our interest here needs to take precedence, and we need to make sure that that is protected, and we sort of project a united front. So as a community, we're protected rather than be divided by what politicians in South Asia are doing. And that goes without saying that some of those political issues and divides are frivolous, that originated because of our colonial history, and they should be resolved, but they're not. And that's a separate issue, but that shouldn't be impacting us here, because we have to be a united community here, so we can make progress and advance our interest here in America.
yeah. So true. Danish, I so appreciate your perspective because both of us as artists have always talked about that, and something that we've always concluded with is it's interesting if you look at some of these big philosophers, these big poets of South Asia, they are trying to talk about unity. They're trying to talk about um, things that still are important today. Like I'm going to back to um, there's a Kabir Doha that essentially says um, you can kill somebody with a bow and arrow, but the
Mhm.
true victor is somebody who kills the ego within. And that's such a powerful thing. And that's the beauty of art, which is if we really think about these languages and the cultures that each of these languages have, Urdu, and we were talking about Ghalib, Avdi or Braj through Kabir and stuff, they're really powerful. And yet our community um, tries to sometimes shun these languages because, again, of the old colonial mindset that these languages are secondary to
Mhm.
something else. But then also, like that is an important aspect to when we think about the safety of our own community. Because if we were able to transcend um, our small pockets and really look at the broader South Asian community or the API community, there is so much strength in numbers. Um,
And I
so
think here I would mention that sort of the leadership depends on us artists, right? To sort of bring those languages and those poets that sort of have rooted our value system, South Asian value system. Bring those and revive those here in America for the South Asian diaspora. So that leadership, that leadership is
On us. So
is on
you're
us.
throwing a lot of responsibility on us. So I guess the most responsible thing is we got to vote. That's coming up. Early voting happens until November 3rd. I think that's this Friday. And then if you're in the city of Houston, voting, election day itself is November 7th. Danish and I both are planning on voting, are going to vote. We hope you can vote as well. Danish, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate you talking about your community and then giving us your perspective.
Same here. Thank you so much. Always a pleasure to talk to you about these things. And I know this conversation is ending, but let's continue off the mic, off
Yeah,
the camera.
sounds good. Thank you. Good night, everyone.
Take care. Bye bye.